Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Over the next 2 days, India's top diplomats will be dealing with one of their biggest foreign policy challenges. That is because the 48 members of the Elite Nuclear Suppliers Group, or the NSG, will begin their plenary in Seoul, where India hopes it will finally be admitted as a member. India got a historic waiver from the NSG in 2008 for civil nuclear commerce, despite not having been a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which India says is discriminatory. Then too, China was strongly opposed to any exceptions for India, but some heavy lifting by the White House pushed it through. Now, 8 years later, India faces Chinese opposition again, only this time the opposition has been more vocal. Can India cross the China hurdle at the NSG? Well, ahead of the NSG plenary in Seoul tomorrow, China, in fact, has not budged from its position that India's membership is not on the agenda, though they have made some more positive noises and said that 3 rounds of unofficial discussions have been held among NSG members on both India and Pakistan's membership. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said today that China will play a constructive role in the discussions, although parties are yet to see eye to eye on this issue. Such discussions help them better understand each other. She went on to say that the NSG plenary meeting in Seoul is only to deliberate on the entry of members who have signed the NPT. As for the entry of non-NPT countries, the group has never put that on its meeting agenda. Meanwhile, Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar has decided to skip a crucial multilateral summit in Tashkent and has gone to Seoul. MEA sources say there should be no speculation on what the outcome of the NSG meeting will be and that it is a delicate and complex process. Prime Minister Modi will meet the Chinese president in Tashkent tomorrow. Sources telling us, in fact, that all of this likely to go down to the wire. Well, joining us on the program tonight is India's former Foreign Secretary, Mr. Shyam Saran, who in fact was one of the key negotiators in the India-US nuclear deal and one of the key players when India got that NSG waiver in 2008. At that time, Mr. Saran, you were in the thick of things in Vienna. I'm sure you feel for the diplomats today who've flown out to Seoul and have some pretty tough negotiating to do over the next couple of days.
Well, from what I can hear, that there is probably going to be almost as challenging an environment at the NSG meeting as there was in Vienna when we were trying to get the waiver. So I am very interested in seeing what it actually results in, whether India does manage to get the membership or not.
What is your reading of the situation at the moment, sir? Because we know that, of course, in 2008 and as well, the Chinese were strongly opposed to any exceptions being made for India. This time, their opposition seems to be far more public, far more vocal, and they've repeated it today, saying that it's not on the agenda. They've clubbed India and Pakistan together. They've said that, member countries still don't see eye to eye on this issue. And this is on the eve of the plenary. Would you say that this has made India's task very difficult?
Yes, there is no doubt about that, because on the earlier occasion, China had not taken a very public position in terms of its opposition to India getting the waiver. It was working mainly through some of the smaller countries who also had their reservations about India getting the waiver, but they never came out directly themselves in public opposing India's the waiver for India. So this time, the fact that they have taken a very public position makes it a little more difficult for them to step back from that position.
And therefore, why do you think that the Chinese are playing, so difficult with this? Is it because of Pakistan? Is it because they don't want to see India at a high table like the NSG? What's the real game here?
Well, the reasons are very similar to the reasons that were adduced also in Vienna by them, namely that this is something which may undermine the non-proliferation regime. Secondly, that this may upset the balance between India and Pakistan in the subcontinent. We should have a criteria-based approach rather than make an exception for a particular country. So the arguments are not very different from what they were before. But I think what is different this time, as you yourself pointed out, is that the Chinese have taken their opposition into the public domain. And that is why it is a little difficult for them to step back from it.
One of the things that worked in 2008 also was the fact that you had President Bush, who really strongly batted for India. He made a call to the Chinese president at the time, and that certainly helped push things along at that time. Even though this time the US also has given very strong words of support to India, Isn't it a very different United States today and a very different Chinese leadership? Do you believe, what I'm asking is, do you believe that the US pressure could play a similar role like it did back then, or that these are two very different countries in very different circumstances today?
Well, as you pointed out, I mean, it is a different United States today, a different United States leader. There is a much more confident, much more assertive China than we had encountered in 2008. And also, I think the importance of Pakistan to China may have perhaps become somewhat more significant because of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, a long-term commitment that China has made to Pakistan. So there may be multiple reasons actually why China may be taking a much more tough stand than it has in the past. But I would also like to point out that one of the things which succeeded in 2008 was the fact that we were able to mobilize support from virtually all the countries, including those smaller ones who were opposed to begin with. When it became obvious to China that it would probably be the last man standing, in fact, they conveyed their approval for the draft waiver document a few hours before some of the other holdouts did. So from that, I gathered that China would not like, or at least at that stage, did not wish to be the one country which raised its hand and said, I do not want to join the consensus.
And that, in fact, we've also heard, from the Americans that there's no question of India and Pakistan being clubbed together, which is why to hear China repeat that almost every day has really been quite interesting, to say the least. Finally, sir, if you had to stick your neck out, and you said you shouldn't pin hopes and make Seoul sort of the only meeting and the end game of this, do you think that in a sense the government has made a mistake in staking so much on this plenary? Because I think they've been keen to do this before the Obama presidency winds down. But do you think that we set too ambitious a goal to get this done now?
Well, let me say that I don't think there is any harm in being ambitious. In 2008, not many people gave us the chance of actually getting the waiver through. So if we had not been ambitious, if we had not been pushing our case, maybe we would not have got the waiver through. So making that strong effort, I do not take objection to that. But I would hope, as I said, that we don't make the Seoul meeting the make or break meeting. I think that is very important. I think that perhaps this is something which will require a longer play on our part, and that is in the very nature of the kind of issue that we are dealing with. I don't think we should give up too easily, but at the same time, I don't think that we should make Seoul as if this is something that, if India is not able to get the waiver through, this is somehow a setback for India. I don't think that should be regarded as a setback. It should only be regarded as perhaps requiring another step in the future before we can get what we want.
Well, Ambassador Shyam Saran, always wonderful to talk to you, sir, and nobody knows how to deal with the NSG, I think, better than you do, given your experience in dealing with all these countries when India got that historic waiver in 2008. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, joining us on the program tonight, we have Vivek Karchu, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. We have Dhruv Jaishankar, Fellow for Foreign Policy at Brookings, India. Also with us tonight from the BJP, Mr. GVL Narasimha Rao and Ajoy Kumar of the Congress Party. Mr. Karchu, let me ask you first. Ambassador Shyam Saran, whom we were just speaking to before this, was telling us he believes it's going to be a pretty tough journey for India, but that Seoul meeting should not be seen as a make or break meeting. It may go beyond that, and that it is not a diplomatic failure. Would you agree that that's a fair assessment?
Look, diplomacy is always a process. It should not be related to an event. However, in this particular case, unfortunately, over the past few weeks, this particular Seoul meeting has been given a kind of aura which I think was not merited. And therefore, while the objective of getting into the NSG is very valid and I think has to be pursued and pursued vigorously, I am a little worried if we are abandoning our traditional system of patient diplomacy, of incremental diplomacy and going for broke in this case. We certainly never exposed the Prime Minister directly in the line of diplomatic fire. But in this case, it seems to be being done. It is as if the Prime Minister has taken over the reins of this diplomacy himself. And I wonder whether his advisors in this regard were wise. So I have many concerns at the moment because the Chinese have made their position quite apparent. But equally as of the Chinese, I am equally worried about the Turks, though no one is talking about the Turks, because the big difference between 2008 and now is the Pakistan card which has been played. And we've heard the Pakistanis say somewhat triumphantly that they managed to block.
So
India's
you're saying that the stakes were raised too
One
high.
last word, Nidhi.
Yeah.
Nidhi, just one last word. The question is not whether we'll get in. I think at some stage we'll of course get in. But the question is if Pakistan wants to ensure through China and Turkey that both India and Pakistan get in simultaneously. Now that is the crucial issue. And if the Chinese have accepted this argument, so there are these imponderables at the moment, but diplomacy should never be reckless.
Okay, well, those are pretty strong words. Dhruv Jaishankar, let me take that to you. Mr. Karju saying diplomacy shouldn't be reckless. He's critical of the way that this was pitched as an, in a sense, all or nothing meeting. You, however, wrote, and you had an interesting set of tweets you put out this morning. You called it a short rant about India's bid for the NSG. And you said, you know, you want to address those people who question why India is investing so much in this and pushing so hard in this, even though it may not necessarily happen this time.
It may not. I don't think we should expect necessarily a firm decision, and perhaps not a decision that goes in India's favor in the next few days. It would be nice if that did happen. It may not. More likely, we'll see this going into overtime. We'll see this being pushed to another meeting, perhaps later this year, something like that. So I think we should keep our expectations low. If there's a positive outcome, that would be great. But I don't think this is an issue that could be resolved through incremental diplomacy. In fact, arguably the NSG India's admission to the NSG should not be a major issue. It should be, India has a strong record, it has made a strong application, it has the support of almost every country in the NSG. So this should be something that is relegated to the inside pages of a newspaper. The fact is, China's very public opposition has made this first tier issue. So in fact, the fact that the Prime Minister has had to be involved in terms of lobbying countries, the fact that the US has had to play a role in lobbying on India's behalf with some countries, is precisely because China is blocking this. So the argument I've made is this isn't a big issue. It need not be a big issue. But India needs to be fighting this fight precisely because it is facing opposition.
And therefore, it should be where you put in your best and you go all out.
Indeed, and in fact, if India can't do this at something such as the NSG, then India won't be able to do it at forums that matter much more. We would expect at some point India will face similar opposition from China at much more important multilateral fora.